Hey guys, welcome back again to another free talk. This time is for book number 4, unit number 5, Law and Order. As you probably know, we're going to be talking about punishment, most common crimes and criminals, and way to sentence or punish these kind of crimes or these kind of people. The first question is going to be, what's the legal age in Colombia? Well, right now, when you turn 18, you are considered to be an adult. So, yeah, that's it. The legal age right now is 18 years old. Alright, and what are you allowed to do when you turn 18? At 18, what are you allowed to do? Well, first of all, you are allowed to vote and be elected. You are allowed to buy alcohol, cigarettes. You are allowed to go to an R-rated movies. Uh, you are allowed to have get your driver license. Uh, go to nightclubs. What else? You can even get your credit card when you're 18. Very good. And do you think you should be allowed to get your own credit card when you are 18? I mean, is that a good idea? Well, if you ask me, I must say it depends. It depends on how responsible you are. For example, some teenagers, because, for some reason they are living or living in a different city from their parents, or their parents are traveling a lot, they have to have a credit card to buy books, pay for clothes and things like that. However, most teenagers, and that's true, I think that's true all over the world, most teenagers are not mature enough. They are very irresponsible as to have a credit card. So for the most part, I don't think it's a good idea for a teenager to have a credit card, because they might be really irresponsible and they might start spending more money than they can cope with, that they can pay back or something. So I don't think it's a good idea. For most seniors, it's really not a good idea to give them or allow them to have a credit card. What about jaywalking? Is there any penalty for jaywalking? Well, not that I know. Actually, when someone is caught jaywalking, I think nothing happens. Nothing really happens. At least not here in Cartagena. People do it all the time, like they cross the street at any points. They don't respect the sight, so nothing really happens when someone commits jaywalking. At least not here in Cartagena. And what happens when someone is caught shoplifting? Well, that's considered a minor crime. Usually when someone is caught shoplifting, they are made to pay for whatever they stole, and usually they are set free. That's it. They are made to pay for what they stole or pay for the damage that they might have caused or something, and that's it. They are not sent to prison. They are not sentenced to prison. They're just made to pay for whatever they stole, and that's it. Or at least give it back. That's it. Alright, and which do you think, or in your opinion, what is the worst crime? Which do you think is the worst crime? Well, rape and kidnapping are very, very disastrous and degrading crimes, but honestly I believe that the worst crime is murder, because you can overcome the fear, you can overcome the trauma of being raped and being kidnapped, but killing someone is something that there is no words to describe what it represents, what it means in a person's family, in a person's life, to be taken away before time, to be murdered. So, I think that's the worst crime. Murder is the worst crime. Alright, and what's the penalty for someone who commits murder here in Colombia? I mean, what happens to someone who kills another person? What happens to a murder? Well, here in Colombia, murder are usually sent to prison. They are sentenced to, I don't know, between 25 to 62, 65 years in prison. I've never heard of someone who has been sentenced to life in prison, not here in Colombia, because I don't think we have those kind of penalty or sentenced to death penalty or something. But they are usually sentenced to 25 to 60 years in prison. All right, and what should happen if you are caught committing burglary? Well, if you are caught committing burglary, of course you should be sent to jail and get sentenced to at least, I mean, if for example, if it is armed burglary, like you get the person in the house and then for some reason you start beating them and hitting them or hurting them, then that would be a more serious crime. So in that case, that person should be sentenced to 10 to 15 years in prison. But if the person only stole some goods like TVs, computers, but hurt nobody, then any penalty between 5 to 10 years would be nice. They should be sentenced to some 5 or 10 years in prison for committing burglary. What about vandals? What do you think should be done to vandals? Well, that's not a very serious crime. You know, what they mostly do is spray graffitis on walls, and they destroy like bus stops and things like that. So they should be made to pay for the damage. And if it is graffiti, for example, they should be made to repaint whatever they did. Whatever graffiti they put on the walls, they should be made to repaint the walls as it was before they made their graffitis over there. And if they damage some private properties, then they should be first made to pay for the damage and then sent to prison for at least, I don't know, a couple of months, or be put on probation or something like that. And kidnapping. What kind of sentence should you get for kidnapping? Well, kidnapping is quite a more serious crime. It's one of those things that traumatize your life, that leaves you with scars in your soul, memories that you can hardly forget. So you can hardly, yeah. So for someone who commits kidnapping, I think a fair sentence should be 15 to 20 years in prison. They should be sentenced to 15 to 20 years in prison. All right, and what do you think ought to be done if a 13-year-old boy or girl sneaks into an R-rated movie? They go into an R-rated movie without their parents' permission. What ought to be done? Well, I think that happens all the time, pretty often, all right? And what ought to be done? I don't know. Their parents should be called and being told, what happened, and they should be, I don't know, sent back to their houses and be reprimanded or scolded, or they should be grounded or something like that, because this is not really, I mean, sneaking into an R-rated movie is something that is not gonna harm anybody. It's just because you're underage and you're not supposed to be watching porn or violent movies. But it happens all the time, especially now with satellite TV. Almost in every house there is satellite TV, and so kids, underage people, they just watch whatever they want to without any restriction, and nothing happens. So the worst thing here should be ground them, like not allow them to, I don't know, use their cell phones, or go on the internet for a week or 2 weeks or something like that. That's what ought to be done. They should be grounded and not let them go on the internet or use their cell phone or hang out with friends for at least a couple of weeks. That would be a fair punishment for young people sneaking into an R-rated movie. By the way, do you think that teenagers should be allowed to have a part-time job? Should they be encouraged to have a part-time job? Well, poverty is a major issue right now in Cartagena. A lot of families, they only have one income, and with the depletion of natural resources and the increase of the pricing products, it's been more necessary for both parents to work so they can have two incomes. However, I think this does not justify the fact of a teenager getting a part-time job, mostly because what they have to do is go to school, get an education, and then, only then, when they are mature enough, when they have the education they need, then allow them to start getting or applying for a job. But when you are an 18, 14, 15, or you are a teenager, you shouldn't be encouraged to work. You shouldn't be even allowed to work, because once you start working, you start forgetting about studies. You don't want to go back to school because you're already making money. So I think teenagers should not be allowed or encouraged to get a part-time job. Alright, and what happens if you are caught speeding too many times, like driving too fast too many times? Well, as far as I know, for example, if you commit speeding like a couple of times, you get fined. You get fined. I don't know how much, but definitely you get fined. But if you are caught committing speeding too many times, then you are running the risk to lose your driver license. That's what happens here. You're running the risk to lose your driver license. All right. What about the dropout rates at school? What should be done to decrease or lower the dropout rates at school? Well, dealing with these students who don't want to go to school, this student who wants to quit studying, it's a big issue. It's not easy. So I think in order to stop the dropout rates, parents should be given some sort of courses or advice, some sort of advice on how to deal with their kids at their homes, because it's right there where the problem starts. Then when kids are having problems at home, they get to school with this kind of attitude, this negative attitude, like they don't respect the teacher and everything. So the first thing to do, their parents ought to be given some sort of I don't know, strategies to deal with the students or the children motivation to get an education. And then security at school should be improved. How can you explain that a teenager is skipping classes without their teachers or their parents knowing about it? Schools are supposed to be a safe place uh, for both people inside and people outside. So people outside cannot get inside without permission, and people inside cannot go away without permission. So that's another issue. Security should be improved. The security in the schools ought to be improved. So as to prevent students from skipping classes and ultimately dropping out. All right, one more question. Mototaxism or mototaxismo. What should be done to deal with mototaxismo in Cartagena? Two things. Number one, the service of mototaxismo ought to be legalized, because a lot of families are living on whatever money they make from mototaxismo. If you eliminate it, then the crime and the crime rates are going to rocket they are going to rocket to the sky, because what are all these men without a job going to do if mototaxism were banned from Cartagena, hitting Cartagena? Okay, they would start committing more and more crimes, and then everything would be even worse. So I think they have to make a law should be passed to I don't know, legalize the service of mototaxismo, give them some sort of identification that only certain peoples with certain qualifications can offer this kind of service. That's what ought to be done, I think.